Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to take some pretty dense archaeological concepts and transform them into a totally fascinating visual journey of discovery. Think of me as your elite personal tour guide across Turkey's absolute greatest museums and historical sites. We're going to decode the past together, taking what might just look like a bunch of ancient rubble to the untrained eye and turning it into a vivid, living story of human history. Let's get into it.
But right before we dive in, I want you to think about something. Have you ever walked through an ancient ruin or a massive museum and just felt completely overwhelmed? Well, it doesn't have to be that way. It can actually turn into an exciting mystery once you have the right decoder ring. And that is exactly what this explainer is designed to be. We are going to give you the exact visual tools you need to understand what you're actually looking at, so you can literally hear the stories whispered by those ancient stones. So, here's our game plan for today. 1. Codes of the ancient world. 2. Artifacts and archaeological periods. 3. Istanbul's historical treasures. 4. Anatolia's heart and underwater. And finally, 5. Humanity's ground zero. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Codes of the Ancient World. It's time to build your archaeological toolkit.
We're going to start with the Naos, which you might also hear called the Cella. Historically speaking, this is the absolute heartbeat of an ancient belief center. When you locate the Naos in a ruin, you're standing in the most sacred interior space of that site. It's the exact spot where the towering statue of the god or goddess was housed. Finding it instantly reveals to you the primary driving purpose behind the temple's entire construction. Now, next time you're standing in one of those massive ancient theaters, I want you to look for the cavea. This is the stepped seating area that was designed specifically for spectators. And why does this matter? Well, the size of the cavea actually gives us a direct mathematical clue about the capacity of the theater. That, in turn, gives archaeologists an incredible estimate of the entire population of that ancient city. It's literally ancient data hiding in plain sight. Moving just outside the ancient city walls, we find the necropole. Translating literally to the city of the dead, these mass burial areas are, without a doubt, our absolute best source for understanding ancient burial traditions and spiritual beliefs. Because people were buried with their most prized possessions and religious artifacts, the necropole basically acts as a perfectly sealed time capsule, giving us a window into their daily lives and their views on the afterlife. And this next concept brilliantly illustrates the evolution of ancient public life. On one hand, we have the Greek agora. This was a casual, open city square where all the political, commercial, and religious daily life naturally took place. But then, contrast that with the Roman Forum, which served the exact same civic purpose, but was heavily monumentalized and totally surrounded by grand public buildings. It really shows how the whole concept of the public square shifted over time, going from a free-flowing, open gathering space to a highly structured showcase of pure imperial power. Okay, moving right along to Section 2, Artifacts and Archaeological Periods. Let's map out human history, shall we? To really understand this stuff, we need to anchor ourselves in deep time. Let's trace the journey, starting all the way back in the Paleolithic or Old Stone Age, where humans were living out their lives as hunter-gatherers in caves and rock shelters. From there, we cross a massive, world-changing turning point into the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, where humanity finally transitions to settled farming and agriculture. And finally, we step into the Chalcolithic period, the Copper Stone Age, where early metalworkers start shaping copper alongside stone, perfectly setting the stage for complex civilizations to emerge. Now, when we look at archaic Greek art, there is a stark visual contrast that is just truly fascinating. When classifying ancient statues, archaeologists use some very specific terms. The term koros refers strictly to naked young male statues, usually standing rigidly with their left foot stepping forward. But in total contrast, the kore refers to young female statues, and these were always depicted fully clothed. This one simple visual distinction actually tells us volumes about gender representation and societal norms in early ancient Greek society. I want you to keep the term sarcophag in mind. You probably know it as a sarcophagus, right? But did you know that literally translated it means flesh-eating stone? Yeah, pretty intense. These were incredibly elaborate tombs made of stone, marble, or terracotta. Definitely lock this concept into your memory because we are about to see some of the most breathtaking examples of these flesh-eating stones anywhere in the world. Which brings us to Section 3,
Let's explore Istanbul's historical treasures and step inside the imperial capital. At the Istanbul Archaeology Museums, which, fun fact, is actually Turkey's very first intentionally designed museum building, dating back to 1891, we find these totally incredible sarcophagi. Take the Alexander sarcophagus, for instance. It's a Hellenistic masterpiece featuring incredibly dynamic, high-relief battle and hunting scenes of Alexander the Great. Right next to it is the Crying Women's sarcophagus, beautifully shaped like an Ionic temple with 18 distinct mourning figures. And then you have the Tabnet sarcophagus. This one belonged to a Phoenician king, and it's absolutely fascinating because it features literal curse texts written in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Phoenician alphabet, all meant to scare off grave robbers. But here is a crucial point to remember. Not all history-defining artifacts are grand marble statues. Sometimes they are just humble little pieces of clay that completely change the world. This artifact is the Kadesh Peace Treaty text, discovered in the ancient Hittite capital of Hattusa. It is quite literally a monument to diplomacy. Written out in cuneiform script, it represents the very earliest known peace treaty between two ancient superpowers, the mighty Hittite Empire and the Egyptian Empire.
Now, shifting our focus from ancient antiquity over to the Ottoman era, we have to talk about Topkapi Palace. This place served as the absolute center of the empire for 400 years, and its inventory is just staggering. We're talking highlights that range from the sparkling 86-carat spoonmaker's diamond, which is surrounded by 49 smaller diamonds, by the way, to the famous gold-plated Topkapi dagger, completely encrusted with 3 massive emeralds. The museum also safely houses sacred Islamic relics, including items directly belonging to the Prophet Muhammad. And perhaps most astonishing of all for the history buffs out there, the 1513 Piri Reis world map. It was drawn on gazelle-skin, and it shows the eastern shores of the Americas with an accuracy that is just unbelievable for its time.
All right, moving on to Section 4, Anatolia's Hearts and Underwater. Time to dig up some deeply preserved secrets.
Over in Gaziantep, at the massive Zeugma Museum, the famous Gypsy Girl mosaic just completely captivates visitors because of her mysterious 3/4 profile gaze that literally seems to follow you as you walk past. People often call her the Mona Lisa of the East. Meanwhile, down in Hatay, you have the colossal stone statue of the late Hittite king Supiliuma. This thing just commands absolute authority. It's carved with these wide, intense, inlaid limestone eyes, and he's holding a spear in one hand and wheat in the other, perfectly symbolizing his dual power over both war and agricultural prosperity. Speaking of Hatay, the region also gives us this surprisingly modern, really humorous piece of advice that stretches all the way across millennia. Found in the same area is a famous mosaic depicting a totally chill, lounging skeleton with a very simple, timeless message written right next to it. Be cheerful, live your life. It is such a vivid, wonderful reminder that the ancient people who walked those exact same streets enjoyed the exact same simple, everyday pleasures that we do today. Okay, now let's take a plunge underwater off the coast of Bodrum. The Bodrum Underwater Archaeology Museum houses the incredible Uluburun shipwreck. This site captures a perfectly frozen moment of late Bronze Age tragedy dating all the way back to the 14th century BC. When it sank with its cargo, it effectively preserved an entire ancient trade route at the very bottom of the sea. Divers eventually recovered oxide-shaped copper ingots, gorgeous ivory objects, and, get this, even a completely unique gold seal that actually belonged to the legendary Egyptian Queen Nefertiti. Back on dry land, we have 2 more vital stops to make. First, the Antalya Museum, which houses the iconic Weary Heracles, a statue whose top half was actually famously repatriated from America just to be rejoined with its bottom half. It also features the breathtakingly fluid dancing woman masterpiece from the Hellenistic period. Then, up in Ankara, the Anatolian Civilizations Museum showcases the deeply religious early Bronze Age Hatti sun discs, which represented cosmic order. And, remarkably, they also hold perfectly preserved, nailless wooden furniture and bronze vessels from the actual literal tomb of the legendary Phrygian king Midas. Finally, we've arrived at Section 5, Humanity's Ground Zero. We are stepping back to the very dawn of civilization. Picture this. You're staring at something from roughly 9,000 BC. This is the Urfa man. Found near Balıkesir in Şanlıurfa, this figure features these haunting, deep eyes crafted from black obsidian stone. And why is this guy so significant? Well, because the Urfa man is officially recognized as the oldest known human-sized sculpted statue in existence. You are quite literally looking at humanity taking one of its very first attempts to reflect its own image in a life-sized form. It's chilling in the best way possible.
And just a stone's throw nearby is Göbekli Tepe. This is a site that literally rewrote the history books. It features monumental, towering T-shaped pillars, some intricately adorned with these fierce, carved reliefs of bulls, foxes, and scorpions. But the truly earth-shattering realization here is the timeline. This complex, massive religious center was built by hunter-gatherers during the Neolithic period, completely before the invention of agriculture. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the human urge to gather, worship, and build monumental architecture actually preceded our urge to settle down and farm. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on next time you walk through the halls of a museum. From the massive ancient pillars of Göbekli Tepe to the clay peace treaties of Hattusa, all the way to those elaborate flesh-eating stones of Istanbul, these societies managed to engineer their memories to survive for millennia. They left us their treaties, their gods, and yeah, even their skeleton jokes. Looking at the sheer permanence of what they created, what will our civilization leave for the future? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into history. Keep exploring and keep decoding the past.